Hello and welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Media. I'm your host, Emily. You may know me from other episodes of this show. I'm not usually the host, but today I was tapped to record an episode about a movie that I watched, and Max did not, so I will be doing a short solo review for the movie A Real Pain. Before I get into talking about this movie, I do want to give a little content warning heads up for this review. This movie covers a pretty significant number of heavy themes, not limited to, but including genocide and suicide. So if those are topics that you are sensitive to, that you're not comfortable with, I would not recommend this movie, nor would I recommend this review. So to get into what the deal with this movie is, it stars Jessie Eisenberg and Kieran Collin as cousins whose mutual grandmother passes away, and the two decide to take a trip to Poland to go on a memorial tour about the Holocaust, of which their grandmother was a survivor. The movie was directed and written by Jessie Eisenberg, in addition to him playing the leading role. But the movie takes a look, very much so in my opinion, at grief as a concept and as a sort of overarching theme. It takes the very personal grief of these two cousins who are struggling with this very traumatic loss in their life and how they're coping with it, and their strained relationship with each other, which has obviously not been nearly as good since their grandmother passed, or since they've been older and gone divergent ways in life, and contextualizes it within sort of a larger cultural grief in terms of the Holocaust. Both characters in the film are Jewish, and there is a very significant aspect of Jewish history and immigration and sort of post-World War II experience that this movie seeks to comment on. I cannot speak necessarily personally to those experiences, as that is not a culture that I come from, but I was personally deeply moved by those aspects of the movie. I think that a lot of the writing that comes across, especially from scenes with Eisenberg's character, are clearly very personal and very meaningful. It seems a lot like he put his own sort of soul into that aspect of the writing, which really stood out to me. Part of what I loved about this movie, I went to go see it with my roommate. We went to go see it because we had been hearing a lot of Oscar buzz about it. And frankly, I think it deserves a lot of the hype that it's getting, not just on a writing level, though any of you who have frequently listened to my appearances on this show know that I have a particular affinity for effective writing and storytelling in movies. I think there's a lot of exceptional filmmaking that winds up being on display in this project as well. For a first-time director, you really can't tell with Eisenberg that he hasn't done this before. The movie is exceptionally well shot and well structured. I noticed a lot of the time throughout the movie that they would sort of interrupt these particularly emotionally difficult or sort of brutal scenes with interjections of sort of Polish architecture, of these different locales that the characters visit across the course of this tour that they're taking. And it's all very sort of beautifully framed and extremely well done. And one specific technique that I noticed was that, I mean, for a film that is about a topic that is as emotionally upsetting as genocide and surviving the Holocaust, and it being however long that it's been, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it's 80 years, something like that. For being how long that it's been, it still leaves this very lasting mark on these characters. And while they're all dealing with their own individual griefs, whether it be divorce, whether it be depression, whether or not it be stagnation in modern life, this sort of cultural trauma that is a shared aspect for all of them is really embraced in the filmmaking. The film takes so much time to draw attention to Jewish traditions, to different monuments and aspects of Poland and Polish culture that were sort of marked by this really horrible historic event. And I was really impressed by how the most uncomfortable, bitter, upsetting moments of the film that sort of deal with that raw emotionality are broken up by this attention to what everything looks like now, this almost sort of separation between history and the way that we live now. And I would argue that it's a very intentional theme of the movie. You'll see it a lot throughout the film of the juxtaposition of what generational trauma and interpersonal individual trauma looks like, and how those two things are juxtaposed, which is really broken down in what I consider to be the single most effective scene, most moving scene to me in the movie, which is this scene where all of the characters on the tour are at dinner, and Jessie Eisenberg's character, who is sort of shy and reserved throughout the whole movie, kind of spills his guts in a sense. He speaks a lot and tells a lot about his own life story, about Benji, who's played by Kieran Culkin, the cousin character, his story, and everything just sort of comes out in this one long continuous rant that it just blew me away. That was the scene in the movie where I fully took in what it was trying to do, and it just absolutely blew me away. I think this is a movie that touches on such a raw and upsetting topic, and many raw and upsetting topics throughout the film. As I mentioned earlier, there are a fair number of moments in this film that deal with depression and a sort of directionlessness that is related to that sort of personal trauma that some of these characters have experienced. But one thing that I really appreciated, especially with Kieran Culkin's character, because who I want to focus in on specifically, because to me he was the strongest portion of the movie, was that it went in a direction that I did not expect for that archetype of character. Because Kieran Culkin's character Benji is very much the sort of, if we were to assign him an archetype, he would be like the fuck up. He is a stoner. He's awkward. He doesn't really have like a stable job. And so when characters like that are in movies, normally they tend to come across as being the like unstable, just do whatever, and they need to be like set on the right path. But what's interesting to me about Benji, and the way that I really appreciate that they handle him, is that he actually has this great intelligence for the feelings of others and for the situations of others. Throughout the film, he is able to forge connections with other members of this tour group that David, who's Jessie Eisenberg's character, simply can't. And I was really impressed by the way that they handled that, because I felt like a lesser movie, or a movie that was going for maybe something easier, would have just played into him being a fuck up or an uncomfortable person to be around. But the movie takes up a lot of time showing why this person, despite his problems, despite his issues, and he does have issues. There are many scenes in the film involving Benji that are deeply uncomfortable. But despite all of that, he is still shown as this deeply empathetic and likable person for real reasons. And so when you have those hard or upsetting or bitter moments with him, it hits that much harder, because they've gone so deeply out of their way to show why anyone likes him, why he is a likable person, and why the people in his life do care about him, rather than playing up comically his flaws. There's a lot going on with him, and Culkin brings each one of those eccentricities to the forefront in very unique ways, and he really plays into every facet of the character. It's an extremely nuanced performance, and I was very impressed, although not surprised. Kieran Culkin was also excellent in Succession, so I was unsurprised to see him bringing another absolutely stellar performance to the table. Despite playing a very different character, there was a lot of what made his performance in Succession good brought to the table here as well. I also wanted to shout out Jennifer Grey and Will Sharp and a couple of other actors, including Kurt Egiowen, who plays this character who is a Jewish convert who's originally from Rwanda. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that actor's name wrong, but he portrays a particularly interesting character in the ultimate context of the film as someone who is a survivor of a more recent genocide. And that plays a lot into aspects of the film that are related to being Holocaust survivors and descendants of Holocaust survivors, and how that plays into the dynamics of the group as they go through this tour about their own personal history. And I really wanted to shout that out, because I was impressed that for such a small number of actors who even play main characters or named characters, each one of them really brought something to the table to be particularly memorable and bring strong performances. So I really wanted to shout that out, because the acting was a major draw for me for this movie. If it gets nominated for any Oscars, I would hope that nominations for some of the acting would come, because I think that there are some really brilliant performances in this movie that stood out to me and I will be thinking about for a very long time, especially with Kieran Culkin's character. For that reason, I really appreciated the level of sensitivity that this movie was taking into its writing. The level of sensitivity with which it approaches its topic was necessary. Like I said, it's a very difficult movie. I would not recommend this to anyone who's looking for a sort of light or easygoing time at the movies. It is a deeply emotional and raw film. The film that I kind of found myself drawing the most comparison to with this movie was Manchester by the Sea, which is a movie that was nominated for Best Picture many years ago at this point, and like 7 years ago or something, that I absolutely loved. That was another film that was very sort of bitterly upsetting and unpleasant and extremely difficult to watch. But I wound up falling in love with it because of how honest and vulnerable of a movie it was and how much it was willing to get at the sort of unpleasant, or I don't know how else to say it, but the less pretty emotions of its characters. I appreciate deeply a film that is willing to engage with the ugliness of certain feelings or ugly emotions that don't necessarily come across perfectly in filmmaking and can't really be resolved prettily with a Hollywood ending. And I will say, if you're looking for a clean emotional resolution, this movie lacks one, which I think was necessary for the story that they're trying to tell. It is very open-ended. It very much just wants to present the situation that these characters are in rather than solve it, which is, I think, a quality of movies that I can find to be admirable, if hard to swallow in certain circumstances. It certainly does not make for a happy experience, but I think that this movie, when it does have its sort of moment in the sun towards the end, when we do get this connection between David and Benji that really seals the deal on their relationship and what they mean to each other, it's beautiful and it is well done. And despite there being a sort of bittersweetness to the direction that the movie goes, I was extremely impressed by how deftly everything was handled. So I definitely recommend this movie. Especially with it running the circuit for awards and potentially being a Best Picture nominee. I recommend checking this movie out while it's still in theaters. Like I said, a lot of the sort of filmmaking and cinematography and the use of music is all great, and it is deserving of being seen in a theater. A lot of the showings of this movie are not necessarily super populated because it hasn't gotten a lot of buzz. It hasn't gotten a lot of sort of publicity, especially because Jessie Eisenberg is, a first-time director, I don't know if it's his first time writing. I'm going to look that up real quick. Please cut this out of the recording, Max. I would like to issue a correction to something that I said earlier. Jesse Eisenberg's first movie that he wrote and directed was When You Finish Saving the World from a few years ago, which also got a little bit of buzz. It had Finn Wolfhard and Julianne Moore in it. However, this being his second picture, it seems like he's sharpened up a lot of those skills and has definitely earned the buzz that has been going around about this movie. And I'm personally pulling for it to get a Best Picture nomination. I would really like to see more movies like this receiving mainstream attention, because as much as they are difficult or unpleasant, I really think that this movie is beautifully done and deserves all of the praise that it's gotten critically, and deserves better success commercially. That's all I have to say about this movie. I hope that I've inspired you all to go and check this out. It is a really excellent film and definitely deserves to be talked about more, especially on the awards circuit. So go ahead and check this out. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you like content like this. I will be doing another solo review for The Brutalist in about a month when it comes out, so look forward to that if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on movies and hearing me get more confident at doing these solo reviews. Be sure to share this video with anyone who you think will find it interesting, and share word of mouth about this movie, because I genuinely think it deserves to be talked about more than it currently is. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.